Okay, check the time. What have we been sitting here? 6 hours. 7.
I think we crossed the 7-hour mark about 2 coffees ago. I mean, the sun is technically down, but the fluorescent lights in this library are just timeless.
Yeah, they exist in a dimension totally outside of chronobiology.
Completely.
I feel like my brain is physically vibrating right now. But anyway, welcome to the Psychology Undergrad. We are your two favorite, incredibly exhausted students, currently buried under a stack of research papers that is, I'm pretty sure it's taller than my actual dorm room mini fridge.
It is capstone season, the final stretch. And tonight, we're cramming for what feels like, honestly, the most existential topic on the syllabus, because usually we're sitting here memorizing the standard script of human
Yeah,
development, right?
like Psych 101 basics. You're born, you develop object permanence, you go to school, you have a massive identity crisis in your teens, you find a partner, you have your 2.5 kids, you retire, you die. That's the normative trajectory.
Yeah, sociologists literally call it the standard package. And statistically, it is the dominant narrative. I mean, about 80% of adults will eventually become parents. It's the river that almost everyone swims in.
But tonight, we are not studying the river. We are studying the people who basically climbed out onto the bank and just started walking into the woods. We're looking at the 20%, the outliers.
The people who opt out of biological reproduction entirely.
Exactly. Voluntary childlessness.
Mm.
Or, as the modern lexicon prefers, the child-free life. And I have to say, going through this stack of literature, Oggs, Avison, Furnham, Blackstone, Rothruff, it is totally rewriting a lot of my assumptions.
Oh, same here. I came into this deep dive thinking we'd be reading about people who just hate kids or are like super aggressively career obsessed. But the data is so much weirder.
Way more nuanced.
Yeah, we've got personality profiles that challenge the Big Five model. We've got these crazy sociological paradoxes about who does the dishes. And we've got this incredibly heavy developmental psych data about what happens to these people when they get old.
Right, like do they regret it? Do they die lonely?
We have the answer, and spoiler alert, it is not what your grandmother told you would happen.
Not all. But before we dive into the methodology, and honestly, before I actually collapse face first onto this textbook, we need to talk about the one variable we are currently completely lacking.
Sleep.
Precious, restorative, memory-consolidating sleep.
Look, we're psych majors. We know the neuroscience here. If you don't sleep, your hippocampus literally does not move memories into long-term storage. So all this cramming we're doing right now,
It's useless if we don't get good REM cycles.
completely useless. And let's be honest, dorm beds. Apartment mattresses that have been passed down through like 5 generations of undergrads, they're trash. They're absolute heat traps.
That is why we are genuinely obsessed with Cozy Earth. And guys, this isn't just a plug. This is an actual survival strategy for finals week. We're talking about their bamboo sheet set.
I was so skeptical until I actually touched them. It's made from viscose from bamboo, so it's absurdly soft. But the real game changer for me is the temperature regulation.
Oh, absolutely. I used to wake up sweating halfway through a nightmare about failing statistics. But with Cozy Earth, it breathes. It wicks moisture. You stay at a perfect homeostasis where deep sleep actually happens.
And look, we know the student budget struggle is very real. Buying premium sheets feels like a massive splurge when you're literally eating instant ramen for dinner. But you have to think of it as an investment in your GPA.
It really is. And we have a way to soften the blow for you. We've got a 21% discount for our listeners, basically our virtual study group.
That is a huge discount.
It is. So use the promo code PSYC101. That's PSYC101. Go to CozyEarth.com, $1 discount, PSYC101. Get the sheets, get to sleep, pass the exam.
Okay, sheets are mental bookmarks. Let's open the actual books now. What is on the syllabus for this hour?
So we've structured this deep dive into 3 main lecture modules. Module 1 is the personality profile. We're looking at trait theory. Who are these people? What is their actual psychological makeup? We're going to pull heavily from a study by Avison and Furnham that breaks down the big 5 traits.
Right, and then Module 2 is the sociology of the home. This is based on Amy Blackstone's work, How Do Child-Free People Do Family? We're analyzing intimacy, economics, gender roles, and this really fascinating concept of fictive kin.
And finally, Module 3 is developmental psychology, the long game. We're looking at Erikson's stages of development in a longitudinal study by Rothruff and Cooney. This is where we answer the big regret question.
That's the heavy hitter right there.
For sure. So let's start with Module 1, the personality profile. Source material is Avison and Furnham, 2015. The paper is called Personality and Voluntary Childlessness.
First things first, we have to operationalize our terms. Because in scientific literature, you can't just say people without kids. That group is way too messy.
Right, there are too many confounding variables. The paper distinguishes between three main types. First, you have involuntary childlessness. That's medical infertility or circumstantial stuff like never finding a partner despite really wanting one. That is obviously a tragedy for those individuals, but it's not what we're studying today.
Then you have temporary childlessness, the postponers. The I'm focusing on my career right now, ask me when I'm 35 crowd.
But then you have the target demographic for this deep dive, the voluntary child-free. The people who have made a conscious, active choice to completely opt out. And within that group, Avison and Furnham make a really cool distinction between early articulators and postponers.
This is crucial for the psych profile. The early articulator is the person who, even as a kid or a teenager, just knew. They're the ones who looked at a baby doll and felt absolutely nothing, or looked at their parents' exhausted lives and thought, yeah, not for me.
Versus the voluntary postponers who maybe kept pushing it back and back until eventually they woke up one day and realized, hey, I actually like my life this way. I'm going to lock this in as a permanent choice.
Exactly. So Avison and Furnham ran the Big Five personality test on this specific group.
Okay, quick review for anyone who hasn't taken a psych class in a while. The Big Five. It's the gold standard of personality psychology. We use the mnemonic ocean to remember it.
Right. Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism.
So if we compare the standard package parents to the child-free cohort, where are the deviations? What is the single biggest predictor that someone will choose not to have kids?
Interestingly enough, the biggest predictor wasn't technically one of the Big Five. It was a trait that they measured alongside it. Independence.
A big sixth, essentially.
Yeah, the study found that child-free individuals score significantly higher on independence. They place a massive overriding value on autonomy. They prioritize the ability to make decisions without needing committee approval.
Which, if you really think about the daily mechanics of parenting, is incredibly logical. Parenting is kind of the death of autonomy. You are permanently tethered to another human being. You can't just go to the movies on a whim. You need a sitter. You can't just move to a new city. You have to obsess over school districts.
Exactly. If your core personality structure is built around high autonomy, the constraints of parenthood aren't just annoying, they are psychologically suffocating. It creates this dissonance that parents who statistically might score lower on independence just don't feel as acutely.
That makes a lot of sense. But let's look at the actual Big Five scores now, because this is where the tea really gets spilled. Let's talk about agreeableness.
Oh, this is the controversial one. The data shows that child-free people score significantly lower on agreeableness.
Okay, stop right there. Because when I hear low agreeableness, I immediately think, jerk. I think about the guy who screams at the barista because his latte is too cold. Are we saying child-free people are just mean?
No, not at all. And we really need to unpack the psychometric definition of agreeableness here. In the Big Five model, agreeableness measures your tendency towards social harmony. High scorers are compliant, they're trusting, and they value getting along with the group above almost everything else.
So they're kind of conformists.
Yeah. In a way, yes. They are the social glue of a group. Now, someone with low agreeableness isn't necessarily hostile. They are just skeptical. They're way less likely to conform to social norms just to keep the peace. They prioritize their own internal logic or values over the group's approval.
Oh, wow. Okay, that makes total sense in this context. Because having children is the ultimate social norm. It is the biggest group project humanity has going.
Exactly. I mean, imagine the sheer social pressure. Your mom desperately wants grandkids. Your friends are all suddenly having baby showers. Society as a whole says this is just what you do. A person with high agreeableness will feel an immense, almost physical pull to comply with that expectation because they're terrified of disappointing anyone.
Whereas the low agreeableness person looks at all that pressure and says, I don't care if you're disappointed. This path does not make sense for me.
Precisely. It takes a certain level of interpersonal armor to reject the standard script. You have to be willing to be the odd one out at the dinner party. You have to be willing to let people think you're selfish or weird.
So it's not about being mean. It's about having incredibly strong boundaries against social expectations.
Correct. But there is a downside. Avison and Furnham note that low agreeableness can sometimes correlate with smaller social support networks. If you aren't naturally nurturing or hyper-compliant, you might not effortlessly build that village that parents just naturally fall into.
So you gain autonomy, but you do risk isolation.
It is a trade-off. Now let's look at extroversion,
Child-free people scored lower here too, right? More introverted.
which totally tracks. Parenting is an incredibly high stimulation activity. It is constant noise, constant touch, constant social interaction with the kid, with teachers, with pediatricians, with other parents at the playground.
Right, if you are an introvert who recharges by being completely alone in a quiet room, a toddler is basically an energy vampire draining your battery 24/7.
Exactly. Child-free people tend to prefer quieter, much lower stimulation environments. They fiercely protect their peace.
Now, what about openness to experience? Because I would logically assume that people who break the mold are pretty open, right?
This is where that earlier distinction between early articulators and postponers comes back into play. The study found that early articulators, the ones who knew they didn't want kids when they were really young, score significantly higher on openness.
Okay, explain the mechanism there.
High openness correlates with imagination, intellectual curiosity, and a general willingness to challenge authority and tradition. These are the people who look at the standard package and think, is there another option on the menu?
They're the ones ordering a la carte, while everyone else is just getting the set meal.
That's a great way to put it. They are naturally inclined to question the status quo. Postponers, on the other hand, might just kind of drift into childlessness because of circumstances, so they don't necessarily have that high openness trait driving the initial decision.
Let's pivot to the demographics for a second, because the profile gets even more specific when you look at education and personal beliefs.
We know that generally higher education correlates with lower fertility across the board, but Avison and Furnham found that the specific field of study actually matters a lot.
This part was fascinating to me. So if you are a psychology major like us, or if you're in teaching or healthcare,
You are statistically more likely to have kids. These are the caring professions. They attract people with high agreeableness and high nurturance,
but if you are in arts or humanities,
much more likely to be child-free. These fields attract people who value independence, critical thinking, self-expression, and perhaps a more non-linear, unpredictable lifestyle.
it's the difference between the pediatric nurse who wants to care for a massive family and the novelist who needs absolute pin-drop silence to finish their book.
There's stereotypes, sure, but the data actually backs them up. And then there is the biggest demographic divide of all, religion and politics.
This link was incredibly strong in the research. Child-free individuals are significantly less religious and much more politically liberal.
And this brings us to the sociological concept of moral scripts. Religion provides a pre-written, highly structured script for life. Be fruitful and multiply. It codifies the nuclear family structure not just as a good idea, but as a moral imperative.
If you are highly religious, not having kids isn't just a quirky lifestyle choice. It's a sin, or at least a profound failure of your duty to your faith.
Right. But if you are secular atheist or agnostic, that script is just gone. You are operating on a self-determined moral framework. You have to derive your life's meaning from somewhere else. Without the thou shalt from a deity, the default setting of you must have kids is much, much easier to override.
It effectively removes the guilt mechanism from the equation.
Exactly.
Okay, so that is the who. The independent, skeptical, introverted, secular artist type. Now let's move to Module 2, the why, the underlying motivations.
Avison and Furnham, along with Blackstone, used factor analysis to group the thousands of reasons people give into distinct categories.
For those who maybe skip stats class, factor analysis is basically just a statistical way of taking a messy list of 100 different variables and boiling them down to the main buckets or overarching themes.
Right. And they identified 5 main factors for why people choose to be child-free.
Factor 1. Freedom and independence. The undisputed heavyweight champion.
This was the #1 reason cited across almost all demographics. It is the profound desire for autonomy, the ability to pivot careers instantly, to travel on a whim, to sleep in on a Saturday.
The Sunday morning test. Do you want to wake up at 6 a.m. to watch cartoons and make pancakes? Or do you want to wake up at 11 a.m. and casually get brunch?
Precisely. Factor 2 is intrinsic motivation. This ties straight back to the personality profile. It's this simple statement, I just don't have the instinct.
Which totally validates biological variation.
Mm-hmm.
We culturally assume everyone has a latent maternal or paternal drive that just kicks in one day, but that's demonstrably not true. Some people just don't have it.
And that strongly correlates with the lower agreeableness and nurturance scores we discussed earlier. Then we have factor 3, physical or medical reasons.
Fear of pregnancy, fear of childbirth, or the fear of passing on genetic issues.
This one heavily correlates with neuroticism. If you are prone to anxiety, the physical perils of pregnancy tocophobia is the actual term for the severe fear of it, and the immense, crushing responsibility of keeping a fragile human alive can be completely overwhelming.
Factor 4 is ideological. This is the save the world factor.
Overpopulation, climate
Mhm.
change, the massive carbon footprint of adding another human to the planet. This correlates with openness.
Yeah.
These are people thinking about macro systems and global consequences.
And finally, factor 5, women's interests.
This is the rational, calculated decision regarding career progression and the motherhood penalty. We know empirically that women's earnings drop significantly when they have kids, while men's earnings often don't or even go up.
Mm.
A highly conscientious, career-focused woman looks at that data and frankly sees a terrible business deal.
But here's the thing that really gets me. When people hear these reasons, I want freedom or I care about my career, the immediate societal accusation is, you are selfish.
It is the single most common moral charge leveled against the child-free. You just want to buy nice things and act like a teenager forever.
But the researchers completely flip this on its head, and this is where I want to challenge everyone listening. Is having kids actually altruistic?
Let's look at the reasons people usually give for wanting kids. I want someone to love me. I want someone who looks like me. I want someone to take care of me when I'm old. I want to pass on my family name.
Every single one of those sentences starts with, I want.
Biologically speaking, reproduction is the ultimate act of selfishness. It is the literal drive to forcefully replicate your specific DNA at the expense of other genetic lines.
Whereas the child-free person who cites overpopulation, they technically removing themselves from the gene pool for the benefit of the collective resources. By definition, that is altruism.
And Blackstone's sociology research backs this up beautifully. She found that child-free adults often engage significantly more in community volunteering than parents do.
Because parents are insular, they have to be.
Right. Parents focus almost all their resources on their specific nuclear unit, their kid's school, their kid's soccer team. Child-free people tend to have a much wider radius of care. They volunteer for town councils, animal shelters, charities, environmental groups. They are taking care of the community at large, not just their own progeny.
So they aren't selfish, they just have a totally different target for their generative energy.
Exactly.
Which is a perfect segue into Module 2, the sociology of the home, doing family. Because if you don't have kids, are you even officially a family?
Well, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, no. Their definition is incredibly strict. 2 or more people related by blood, marriage, or adoption. 2 people living together without kids are, statistically speaking, just roommates with benefits.
But sociologists hate that definition. It's way too rigid. They prefer to look at function. Does the unit function like a family?
And we have a specific checklist for this. The 4 functions of family.
Function 1, intimacy.
The pervasive cultural stereotype is that childless marriages are empty, sad. Just 2 people staring at each other in a silent, echoing house.
But what does the data actually say?
Child-free couples consistently report higher marital satisfaction than parents.
Like, significantly higher.
It makes total sense when you break it down. Children are massive stressors. They introduce constant noise, severe financial strain, chronic lack of sleep, and critically, they triangulate the relationship. Attention that used to go exclusively to the partner now gets diverted to the child.
We call that role strain in sociology. You stop being lover and partner, and you suddenly become co-manager of the household corporation.
Exactly. Child-free couples maintain that primary dyadic bond. They have more time for deep conversation, for physical intimacy, for shared hobbies.
But what about the innate human need to nurture? Even if you consciously don't want a human baby, humans are evolutionarily wired to connect and care for things.
Enter the fur baby phenomenon.
Yes, the pets. I love this part of the research.
Blackstone discusses this extensively. In child-free households, pets are often elevated to the official status of fictive kin.
Define fictive kin for the listeners.
It means treating non-biological connections with the exact same social and emotional weight as biological ones. And the biology actually backs it up. The oxytocin release, that's the primary bonding hormone, when a human stares deeply into their dog's eyes. It functionally mimics the parent-child bond.
So when I talk to my dog in that embarrassing high-pitched voice, I'm literally hacking my own maternal circuitry.
You absolutely are, and it perfectly fulfills that function of intimacy and nurturing. You are taking care of a dependent creature. It just happens to have paws instead of hands.
Function 2, economic provision.
We already mentioned that child-free women earn more. They are the ideal workers in a rigid capitalist sense because they don't take maternity leave and don't have childcare emergencies.
But there is a really weird paradox for men in the data. Child-free men sometimes earn less than fathers.
This is the fatherhood bonus working in reverse.
Explain that. Why would a guy without kids make less money?
There are two main theories. One is purely employer bias. Fathers are culturally viewed as stable, responsible, and tied down. Employers like that. They promote that because that guy isn't going anywhere. Child-free men, however, might be viewed subconsciously as eternal bachelors or flight risks.
But there is also the breadwinner pressure theory.
Right. If you are a father, you have to hustle. You have actual mouths to feed. You might take the higher-paying corporate job you absolutely hate simply because you need the security and the health insurance for your kids.
Whereas a child-free man has the total freedom to say, you know what, I'm going to take the lower-paying job at the nonprofit because it's more fulfilling. He can step off the gas pedal.
Exactly. His economic function is totally different because the baseline demand is lower.
Function 3, providing a home. And specifically, we're talking about housework.
This is where we get into the doing gender theory. We know that, generally speaking, child-free couples are much more egalitarian. Without the massive, unequal workload of childcare, it is a lot easier to split the dishes 50-50.
But you found a study from Germany by Dotino that completely broke my brain when I read it.
The housework paradox.
It found that in childless couples, when men did more housework, the divorce rate actually went up.
This is so wildly counterintuitive. In a progressive modern couple, a man doing the dishes should lead to marital happiness.
So why does it lead to divorce?
We have to look at the concept of gender display. The theory is that we are constantly, often subconsciously, performing our gender to validate our identity to ourselves and our partners.
Okay, so man does man things, woman does woman things.
In a traditional family, the man role is heavily solidified by simply being a father and a provider. Even if he occasionally does the dishes, he is still definitively dad. But in a child-free marriage, that core dad role is gone. If he also fully steps into the domestic sphere doing the historically woman's work of cooking and cleaning, he might be violating the traditional gender script just a little too much.
So his masculine identity becomes fragile?
In the eyes of his partner, perhaps. Even highly progressive, child-free women might have deeply internalized sexism. If they see their husband doing too much domestic work, they might subconsciously view him as less masculine or less ambitious.
Or is it the flight risk theory again?
That's the other incredibly compelling option. If a man is doing 50% of the cooking and 50% of the cleaning, he is fully self-sufficient. He literally does not need a wife to survive on a basic domestic level.
He can leave whenever he wants.
The barrier to exit is substantially lower. It is a fascinating, if slightly depressing, look at how gender norms haunt us even when we actively try to opt out of the traditional family structure.
Function 4, reproduction.
Now, this seems like the one they definitely fail. By definition, they aren't reproducing.
Biological reproduction, no. But Blackstone talks about social reproduction.
This is the concept that it takes a village. Social reproduction is the vital work of socializing the next generation, teaching them, mentoring them, passing on culture, ethics, and knowledge.
The cool aunt archetype.
The Panks. Professional aunts, no kids.
I genuinely love the Panks.
Child-free people often play a structurally crucial role in the broader family ecosystem. They are the safety valve. When a teenager absolutely hates their parents and feels completely misunderstood, they can't talk to mom and dad. But they can talk to the cool aunt.
Because she is the adult who is safe, but not directly responsible for disciplining them, she can mediate.
That is social reproduction in action. They are helping to raise the species, they just aren't raising their own specific biological unit.
Which is a perfect transition to the final module. Module 3, the exam question, developmental psychology.
Now, this is where we look at the really long game. Because the biggest fear people have about not having kids is, who will take care of you when you're old? Will you regret it?
We're looking at a pivotal longitudinal study by Rothroff and Cooney from 2008, and we absolutely have to talk about Erikson.
If you haven't memorized Erikson's stages of psychosocial development, you are definitely failing this class tomorrow.
Stage 7. Occurring in midlife, roughly ages 40 to 65. Generativity versus stagnation.
This is the classic crisis of middle age. Generativity is the deep, existential, psychological need to create something that outlasts you. To give back. to actively guide the next generation. It is a profound confrontation with your own mortality.
You realize you're actually going to die, so you frantically need to leave a legacy.
And the cultural assumption has always been, to be generative, you must be a parent. Parenting is the default pre-packaged solution to the midlife crisis. You pour yourself into your kids.
So if you don't have kids,
Hmm.
the classic theory says you inevitably fall into stagnation.
You become self-absorbed. You endlessly obsess over your own health, your own comfort, your own bank account. You essentially become the bitter old person yelling at clouds.
So Rothroff and Cooney actually put this to the test. They carefully measured psychological well-being, sense of purpose in life, and self-acceptance in older adults, both parents and non-parents.
And the results?
Zero significant difference.
Let me repeat that for the tape just so everyone gets it. There was no significant difference in psychological well-being between older parents and older non-parents.
So the lonely, regretful spinster stereotype is just a myth.
Statistically speaking, yes. But there is a massive caveat that we have to understand. The key variable for happiness wasn't kids. It was generativity itself.
Explain the mechanism there.
If a person felt generative meaning, if they were volunteering, mentoring young professionals, creating lasting art, helping their community, they had high well-being. It absolutely did not matter if they had biological children or not.
But if they didn't feel generative,
Then they stagnated. And here's the kicker. This applies to parents too. You can be a parent and be completely stagnant if you aren't actually engaged with your kids or the outside world. Just having the biological child isn't a magic ticket to generativity.
so parenthood is a path to generativity, not the only path.
Exactly. However, for the child-free person, generativity is an active, conscious choice. Parents are forced into it, you have to raise your kid. Or child services shows up. A child-free person has to proactively go out and find a way to give back. If they do, they thrive beautifully. If they don't, they really do risk stagnation.
Now, we have to talk about the anomaly in the data. The one group that really didn't fit the curve at all, the childless men.
This was honestly the most heartbreaking part of the data for me to read.
The study found that for childless men specifically, their psychological well-being in midlife was highly, almost entirely dependent on recalled parental warmth.
Basically translated, how nice were your parents to you 40 years ago?
Why does this matter for childless men so much more than anyone else?
It's about the second chance theory. Think about a father who had a terrible childhood. Cold, distant, maybe abusive parents. When he has his own kids, he has a psychological chance to rewrite the script. He can actively choose to be the warm, loving dad he never had.
He essentially heals his own childhood trauma by doing it better. He replaces the bad memory with a new, positive dynamic.
Exactly. But the childless man, he doesn't get that second act. He doesn't have a child to lavish affection on to prove that he's different from his father, so he is stuck with the original script.
The echo of the past is louder because the house is quieter.
Wow, that is a really poetic way to put it. But yeah, if he had a cold father, that memory looms incredibly large because it hasn't been displaced by a new, consuming identity as a good father.
Plus, we have to talk about social networks and gender.
Right. Women are generally socialized to be much better at maintaining lateral friendships, sisters, friends, community groups. Men, sadly, often rely almost entirely on their romantic partners or their kids to build and maintain their social structure.
So if a man doesn't have kids and maybe his partner passes away or they split up, his world shrinks very, very fast.
And in that awful silence, the early childhood memories become the dominant narrative of his life.
So the key lesson for the men listening to this, please go to therapy, deal with the dad issues now. You can't just distract yourself forever.
Solid advice for literally everyone, honestly.
Okay, my brain is officially full. We have extensively covered the personality profile. They're independent, skeptical, and open. We've covered the sociology, intimacy, fictive kin, and gender paradoxes. And the development generativity is mandatory, but kids are strictly optional.
It is a massive amount of information to synthesize.
Let's wrap up with a final provocative thought. A hypothesis for the road, to keep you thinking while you try to fall asleep.
The evolutionary argument.
We usually think survival of the fittest just means whoever had the most babies wins.
Quantity over quality.
But look at the world we are actually living in today. It is crowded. Resources are severely straining. It is hyper-complex. We are moving away from an agrarian economy where you genuinely needed 12 kids just to work the farm and survive to a highly specialized knowledge economy.
Where you need incredibly high investment in far fewer people.
Exactly. So is it possible that the child-free personality, That independent, open, ideologically driven person is actually a modern evolutionary adaptation.
You're suggesting that nature is actively selecting for non-reproduction.
I'm suggesting that maybe the human species doesn't actually need more biological reproduction right now. Maybe it desperately needs social reproduction.
It heavily connects to the gay uncle hypothesis in evolutionary psych, the idea that having non-reproductive members of a tribe actually increases the survival rate of the nieces and nephews because there are more undivided resources to go around.
Right. If you are child-free, you aren't a genetic dead end at all. You are a resource allocator. You are the buffer. You are the one with the time, the money, and the energy to solve the complex problems that the totally exhausted parents simply can't solve.
That's profound. As society becomes more secular and individualistic, that child-free personality might actually become a dominant, highly necessary trait. We might be seeing a macro shift where cultural contribution is valued just as highly by the species as biological contribution.
You aren't opting out of the human race. You are just playing a different, equally vital position on the team.
The sweeper of the human race,
Yeah.
cleaning up the mess, guiding the play, but not necessarily taking the shot.
I absolutely love that analogy.
I think that's it. I think we're actually ready for this exam.
I feel weirdly prepared.
I just feel like I need to pass out for 12 solid hours.
Which brings us right back to the most important takeaway of the night.
The sheets.
Go to cozyearth.com/discount PSYC 101. Use the code PSYC 101. Get the bamboo sheets, save your sleep, save your memory consolidation, save your GPA.
And to everyone taking the final tomorrow, good luck.
You're going to crush it. Just remember, correlation does not equal causation, and you can definitely be generative without being a parent.
Class dismissed.